My dears, would you believe me if I told you that a boy, all by himself, stood up to an entire courtroom to save the woman who raised him with so much love? Well, come sit with me, because Henry is going to tell us this story. A brave little grandson who even startled the judge with his brilliance, and made the whole jury cry with the truth. So get your tea ready, because this story will warm your heart and make you believe once again in the power of love and justice.
Thank you, Nana Rose. But today the story isn't about you, but rather about dear Grandma Amelia. The fine Oklahoma dust danced lazily in the air, infiltrating every crack and crevice of our small house. It was the same dust that coated the photographs on the bookshelf, mementos of a past I scarcely knew, a past where my parents still existed. Now, only Grandma Amelia and I remained, sharing the silence and the ever-present scent of oatmeal cookies that she insisted on baking, even when life felt more bitter than cold Sunday coffee. Grandma Amelia was always my entire world. Ever since the accident claimed my parents, she became my mother, my father, my best friend, and, on occasion, even my private tutor when I flatly refused to pay attention in Mr. Peterson's class. She was the bedrock of our family, the unwavering anchor that kept us grounded, even when life's tempests threatened to sweep us away. Robust, self-reliant, and possessing a heart larger than the state of Texas, she dedicated her life to caring for others, whether by cooking for ailing neighbors or orchestrating charitable functions for the community. When the news broke, it felt as if the rug had been pulled out from under me. $50,000. Embezzled from the Oklahoma Community Association, where Grandma Amelia had been treasurer for nearly 20 years. The accusation was preposterous, unthinkable. Grandma Amelia? Siphoning off funds? It was akin to accusing the sun of being frigid or the rain of being arid. The lawyer, a tall, gaunt fellow with a strained smile and a suit seemingly plucked from a bygone era, attempted to placate us. "It's a misunderstanding, Henry. We'll sort this out. Grandmother Amelia is a respected woman. There's no hard evidence." However, as the days wore on, the lawyer's smile became increasingly infrequent, and his words less and less persuasive. The evidence, it appeared, was more substantial than he was willing to concede. I watched Grandma Amelia shrink a little more each day, the weight of the accusation bowing her shoulders, extinguishing the sparkle in her eyes. She, who had always been so stalwart, so self-reliant, now resembled a withered leaf trembling in the wind. Sleeplessness plagued her nights, and she barely ate, spending hours gazing at photographs of my parents, as if seeking answers or solace in their smiling faces. The straw that broke the camel's back was when the lawyer summoned us for a meeting. "Henry, Mrs. Amelia, the situation is more serious than I initially anticipated. The evidence is circumstantial, but the prosecution is confident. The most prudent course of action would be a plea bargain. She pleads guilty, receives a lenient sentence, and we avert a trial that could be utterly devastating." Grandmother Amelia regarded him with tear-filled eyes. "Admit to something I didn't do? Never." The lawyer sighed. "Mrs. Amelia, please understand. I'm trying to safeguard you. A trial would be precarious." He looked at me with pity. "Henry, let's be realistic. Your grandmother doesn't stand a chance." In that moment, something within me fractured. That lawyer, with his expensive suit and hollow pronouncements, had forsaken Grandma Amelia. He'd abandoned her, thrown her to the wolves. But not I. I would not allow my Grandma Amelia, the woman who loved and cared for me my entire life, to be wronged. That night, while Grandma Amelia was plagued by restless sleep, I set to work. I scoured every document, every receipt, every scribbled note she had meticulously saved. I spent hours poring over the internet, delving into laws, court procedures, and, most crucially, signature forgery. I wasn't a lawyer, I had no courtroom experience, but I possessed something the lawyer didn't: love. love for my grandma Amelia, and an unshakable resolve to prove her innocence. Nights bled into early mornings morphed into dawns. My eyes burned with fatigue, my fingers ached from incessant typing, yet I pressed on. I had to find something, anything, that could prove Grandma Amelia's innocence. And then I stumbled upon it. A minor anomaly in a signature, a mismatched phone log, a discrepancy in a receipt. Tiny details, seemingly inconsequential at first glance, but which, taken together, coalesced into a complete picture, a picture that unequivocally pointed to the truth. On the day of the trial, the courtroom felt like a labyrinth of unfamiliar faces, whispers, and prying eyes. Grandmother Amelia was pallid and trembling slightly, clutching my hand tightly. The lawyer, with his strained smile, cast me a pitying glance. "Henry, I admire your dedication, but there's simply nothing you can do." I took a deep breath, disregarded the attorney, and guided Grandma Amelia to the defense table. I opened my briefcase, overflowing with notes, documents, and evidence. I looked at the judge, the jury, and finally at Grandma Amelia. Her eyes were brimming with fear, yet also alight with hope. In that moment, I knew I wasn't just standing up for Grandma Amelia. I was defending justice, truth, and love, and I wasn't about to back down. "Your Honor, members of the jury," I began, my voice trembling slightly at first, but gaining strength with each word. "The prosecution's case against Ms. Amelia rests on conjecture and circumstantial evidence, not on concrete facts. The prosecution has attempted to portray a narrative of avarice and mendacity, but that narrative simply does not align with reality." I presented the documents to the jury, elucidating each detail with clarity and precision. The anomaly in the signature, a slight divergence in slant, a stroke thicker than customary. As you can observe, the signature on the $50,000 check does not align with Mrs. Amelia's signature on other documents. It is a forgery, a blatant imitation. I submitted the phone records, demonstrating that on the day the money vanished, Grandma Amelia was at home, caring for me, not at the Community Association office. The prosecution alleges that Mrs. Amelia had a motive to embezzle the funds. But what could that motive possibly be? She dedicated her life to helping others, never asking for anything in return. She has always been honest and of the utmost integrity. I pointed out the discrepancy on the receipt, a typographical error that would have gone unnoticed by most, but one that revealed the document had been altered after its issuance. This receipt has been tampered with, forged to incriminate Ms. Amelia. Someone wanted her to be the culprit, someone who stood to benefit from her downfall. With each piece of evidence presented, I watched the expressions of the jury members shift. Their initial disbelief yielded to curiosity, curiosity to attentiveness, and attentiveness to comprehension. They were beginning to see the truth, to realize that Grandma Amelia was innocent. The prosecutor attempted to interrupt me repeatedly, lodging objections, questioning my credentials, trying to rattle me. But I refused to be cowed. I knew I was on the right track, that truth was on my side. "Mr. Prosecutor," I retorted with unwavering resolve, "I am not a lawyer, that much is true, but I am Mrs. Amelia's grandson, and I know her better than anyone. I know she is innocent, and I intend to prove it, even if it's the last thing I ever do." Now, imagine the following scenario. You are jurors deliberating on someone's fate. Every detail, every nuance matters. This isn't merely about figures on a page, but about a person's life, their reputation, their future. Similarly, the evidence I've presented isn't just isolated fragments, but pieces of a puzzle that, when assembled, reveals the unassailable truth. Furthermore, consider that the prosecution predicated its indictment on a narrative erected upon conjecture and biased interpretations. They failed to furnish any concrete evidence, merely circumstantial indications that, upon closer scrutiny, crumble like sandcastles. Conversely, my evidence is factual, documented, and irrefutable. It demonstrates, beyond any reasonable doubt, that the signature was forged, that Grandma Amelia was elsewhere at the time of the crime, and that the documents were tampered with. It is crucial to remember Mrs. Amelia's character. She has always been a person devoted to the community, a tireless volunteer, a woman of unwavering principles. To accuse her of embezzling funds is tantamount to denying her very essence, her life story. It is akin to accusing a mother of abandoning her children or a physician of neglecting their patients. Therefore, I implore you, members of the jury, to scrutinize the evidence with meticulous care, to give due consideration to the character of Mrs. Amelia, and to resist succumbing to conjecture or prejudice. I beseech you to deliver justice, to acquit Mrs. Amelia, and to restore her to her family, to her community, to her life. The silence that followed my speech was palpable, as thick as the fog that clung to the Oklahoma hills in the early morning hours. A silence laden with the weight of uncertainty, doubt, and anticipation. I could feel their gazes fixed upon me, scrutinizing every gesture, every expression, every word. Grandmother Amelia squeezed my hand tightly, her knuckles white, her face etched with deep wrinkles that recounted a life of hardship, but also of love and generosity. However, even amidst that oppressive silence, I felt a flame ignited within me, an unshakable conviction that the truth would ultimately prevail. A conviction based not solely on material evidence, but also on something far more profound, something that transcended logic and reason. Faith in human goodness, the belief that, at their core, people are capable of recognizing justice when they see it. However, the question then arises: how to translate this faith, this belief, into tangible arguments, into words that could resonate with the jurors and persuade them of Granny Amelia's innocence? How to transmute emotion into reason, intuition into incontrovertible evidence? Rather than succumb to despair, I resolved to explore a crucial facet that had hitherto been overlooked: the social and emotional context surrounding the accusation. After all, as we know, human actions rarely transpire in a vacuum. They are shaped by a myriad of factors, including interpersonal relationships, societal pressures, and individual circumstances. I began to delve deeply into the life of Jack, the man whom the prosecution alleged was the primary beneficiary of the embezzlement. I discovered that Jack was a single father, devoted to his ailing daughter, a sweet and smiling girl who was battling a rare and debilitating disease. The treatment costs were exorbitant, consuming his entire life savings and leaving him on the precipice of financial ruin. Initially, I felt anger towards Jack, resentment for having placed Grandma Amelia in such a precarious predicament. However, as I gleaned a deeper understanding of his backstory, the anger transmuted into comprehension, into empathy. I came to realize that Jack wasn't a villain, a cold and calculating criminal mastermind. He was a desperate man, driven by an unconditional love for his daughter, prepared to undertake any measure to safeguard her. Now, how could this discovery possibly aid me in proving Grandma Amelia's innocence? The answer was straightforward: by demonstrating that Jack possessed a far more compelling motive for embezzling the funds than Grandma Amelia ever could have. By establishing him as the prime suspect, the only one who would truly benefit from the crime. Thus, I presented to the jury the documents attesting to Jack's dire financial straits, the receipts for his daughter's medical treatments, and the loans he had undertaken. I recounted his story, the tale of a desperate father willing to sacrifice his own honor to save his daughter's life. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I am not here to condone what Jack did. The embezzlement of funds is a serious crime and he must be punished accordingly. But I am here to demonstrate that Grandma Amelia is innocent, that she was the victim of a setup, a cruel injustice. And I implore you to deliver justice, not only to Grandma Amelia, but also to the truth itself. Indeed, it is paramount that we contemplate the role of compassion in moments such as these. It is facile to judge, condemn, and cast aspersions. However, it is considerably more challenging to endeavor to comprehend the motivations of others, to empathize with their circumstances, and to feel their anguish. Compassion does not condone criminality, but it aids us in understanding it, in perceiving the humanity underlying the actions, and in discovering a path to redemption. Therefore, I implore you to consider all facets of this narrative, to scrutinize the evidence with diligence, and to heed the counsel of your own conscience. And above all, to remember that justice is not merely a matter of laws and procedures, but also one of values, principles, and fundamental humanity. The prosecutor, visibly irritated by my insistence on diverting the focus from Grandmother Amelia to Jack, attempted to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Henry, we are here to try Mrs. Amelia, not Mr. Jack. His financial straits do not justify the crime, much less prove your grandmother's innocence." Consequently, he submitted further documents, attempting to bolster the accusation against Grandma Amelia. Aged bank statements, testimonies from other community association members, all meticulously curated to paint a portrait of culpability. The pressure was mounting, the atmosphere growing increasingly oppressive. Even amidst that overwhelming deluge of accusations, I resolutely refused to yield. I knew that truth was my staunch ally, and that, with divine providence and the fortitude within my heart, I would assuredly be able to vindicate myself. Furthermore, I've begun to ponder the very essence of justice itself. Is justice merely the dispassionate application of the law, devoid of consideration for the circumstances and motivations of those involved? Or does justice necessitate a more humane, more compassionate perspective, one capable of discerning the complexities of human relationships and seeking the underlying truth obscured by appearances? Now, envision justice as a beacon illuminating the path of truth amidst the shadows of falsehood. However, for this beacon to fulfill its intended purpose, it must be situated in the correct location, its light precisely aimed. Should the beacon be misplaced, or its beam misdirected, it will be unable to safely guide navigators. Justice must be administered with wisdom and discernment, taking into account all facets of the situation. It is insufficient to merely apply the law blindly without considering the circumstances and motivations of those involved. One must diligently, honestly, and compassionately seek the truth. The prosecutor seemed fixated on convicting Grandma Amelia as if his reputation hinged on it. He appeared indifferent to the truth, to justice, to my grandmother's life. His sole concern was winning, demonstrating his superiority, and proving his infallibility. I refused to participate in that charade. I wasn't there to win, to prove anything to anyone. I was there to defend my grandmother, to vindicate her innocence, to ensure justice prevailed. So, I decided to shift my tactics. Instead of dwelling on rebutting the prosecutor's accusations, I resolved to concentrate on presenting the truth, on showcasing who Grandma Amelia truly was, on unveiling the essence of her character. Now, consider how this applies when you're confronted with an unjust situation, when you're accused of something you didn't do. What's the optimal approach to defending yourself? To shout, to thrash about, to deny everything outright? Or to present the truth calmly, with clarity, with unwavering honesty? Similarly, I resolved to present to the jury the testimony of individuals who knew Grandmother Amelia, individuals who had been aided by her, individuals who could vouch for her honesty and integrity. Neighbors, friends, members of the community association, all prepared to testify on my grandmother's behalf. Thus, the courtroom metamorphosed into a veritable theater of emotions, a tapestry woven with life stories, demonstrations of love, and profound gratitude. Tears flowed freely, smiles illuminated faces, and words resonated deeply within the hearts of those present. Grandmother Amelia was depicted as nothing short of a heroine, a saint, a guardian angel watching over them. I also presented the jury with photographs of Grandma Amelia with my parents, photographs of Grandma Amelia with me when I was a child, photographs of Grandma Amelia working at the community association. Photographs that depicted her life, her history, her very essence. Even so, the prosecutor observed everything with a look of disbelief, frustration, and utter defeat. He perceived that his strategy was faltering, that the jury was being moved by the tale of Grandma Amelia, and that the truth was, in fact, prevailing. Consequently, the prosecutor endeavored to discredit the testimonies, challenge the witnesses' veracity, and downplay the impact of the photographs. However, it was to no avail. The jury had already reached its verdict. Their minds were already made up. Justice, therefore, was nigh. Truth was on the verge of triumphing. Grandmother Amelia was about to be liberated. My beloved grandmother Amelia always taught me to value honesty above all else, to never compromise my principles even if it meant facing unpleasant consequences. However, the situation with Jack presented a moral complexity that challenged this simplistic worldview. Revealing the truth about his involvement would entail exposing his daughter to even greater suffering, depriving her of essential medical treatment, and potentially condemning her to a tragic fate. The pursuit of justice was inextricably intertwined with the imperative to exercise compassion and mercy. A delicate equilibrium had to be struck between the duty to safeguard grandmother Amelia and the responsibility to minimize the adverse impact on the lives of others. This moral deliberation demanded a profound analysis of the ramifications of each action, a meticulous evaluation of conflicting values, and a willingness to make arduous decisions, even if it entailed sacrificing something of considerable importance. It is crucial to recognize that truth is not always absolute and can be shaped by differing perspectives and interpretations. What some may view as an act of justice, others might perceive as an act of betrayal. Reality is multifaceted, complex, and seldom fits neatly into simplistic categories of right and wrong. Conversely, the prosecution seemed to disregard this intricate complexity, clinging to a binary narrative that disregarded the subtle gradations of the situation. In their view, grandmother Amelia was either culpable or exonerated, allowing for no middle ground or mitigating circumstances. This simplistic interpretation of justice troubled me profoundly, as I felt it failed to encapsulate the reality of lived experience, replete as it is with ambiguities, contradictions, and moral quandaries. Rather than allowing frustration to consume me, I resolved to harness this insight to bolster my defense. I began to scrutinize the prosecution's motivations, exposing their flawed reasoning and challenging their underlying assumptions. I demonstrated that the pursuit of truth was not merely a matter of presenting facts, but also of interpreting those facts in a fair and unbiased manner. In other words, justice isn't solely a matter of law, it encompasses ethics, morality, and compassion. It's a complex undertaking that demands meticulous factual analysis, an honest appraisal of motivations, and a willingness to make difficult decisions, even if it entails swimming against the tide. On the other hand, Grandma Amelia always taught me to have faith in the inherent goodness of humanity, to believe that people are capable of benevolent actions even in dire circumstances. She consistently told me that love is the most potent force in the world, capable of transmuting lives, healing emotional wounds, and surmounting seemingly insurmountable obstacles. So, I decided to wield that faith, that love, as weapons in my battle for justice. I presented to the jury the story of grandmother Amelia, her life of dedication to others, her unwavering honesty. I demonstrated that she was a good person, a righteous person, a person who deserved to be defended. I began to expound upon the paramount importance of family, community, and solidarity. I demonstrated that grandmother Amelia was a pivotal figure in my life, that she was my anchor, my safe haven. I illustrated that her conviction would not solely impact her, but also myself, my family, and my community as a whole. Every hour, the prosecutor attempted to interrupt me, to question the relevance of my arguments, to downplay the impact of my words. But I refused to be intimidated. I knew I was reaching the hearts of the jurors, that they were beginning to grasp the truth. And so, I continued to speak, with fervent passion, with raw emotion, with unwavering conviction. I spoke of the paramount importance of believing in justice, of striving for truth, of upholding our values. I spoke of the vital importance of love, of forgiveness, of harboring hope. In essence, justice is not merely a matter of law, but equally of love, faith, and hope. It is a process that necessitates fortitude, resolve, and an unwavering belief in the inherent goodness of humankind. And I was prepared to fight to the bitter end, to demonstrate grandmother Amelia's innocence, to champion justice, to venerate her love. Grandmother Amelia, with her tireless dedication to the association, forged bonds that transcended mere bureaucratic obligations. Each bowl of soup served, each event organized, each smile shared were threads that strengthened this web, creating a support network that would prove fundamental in her defense. However, that very web, which had once sustained her, had also become a snare. The expectations placed upon her, the image of integrity she had cultivated over the years, now turned against her, fueling disbelief and suspicion. After all, how could someone so virtuous be capable of such a transgression? This seeming contradiction was, in reality, the linchpin to unlocking the truth. Grandmother Amelia was not an isolated figure, but rather a reflection of the community that had shaped her and that she, in turn, had helped to build. Her innocence was not merely an individual matter, but a moral imperative that resonated with everyone who benefited from her munificence. The prosecution was insistent on decontextualizing the accusation, isolating Grandmother Amelia from her social and emotional milieu. It presented her as a detached and enigmatic figure, obscuring the complexity of her relationships and disregarding the ramifications her conviction would have on the community. Consequently, I resolved to reverse this strategy, transforming the courtroom into a stage where the community could express itself in its entirety. I summoned witnesses who represented the diverse array of voices that comprised the social fabric of Oklahoma. From the smallholder farmer who had received assistance to plant his crops to the teacher who had found in the association a venue to develop educational projects. Furthermore, each testimony was a brushstroke composing a multifaceted portrait of Grandmother Amelia, revealing her capacity to inspire, to motivate, and to transform lives. Witnesses recounted stories of overcoming adversity, of solidarity, of hope, demonstrating that Grandmother Amelia was not merely a treasurer, but rather a catalyst for positive change within the community. Conversely, the prosecution endeavored to discredit the testimonies, asserting they were predicated on emotional bonds and consequently devoid of objectivity. They contended that sentiment clouded reason, thereby precluding the witnesses from impartially assessing the facts. I stood my ground and refuted that assertion, demonstrating that emotion, when channeled constructively, could be a potent instrument for unveiling the truth. Emotion was not an impediment to reason, but rather a complement, a font of insights that allowed one to comprehend the intricacies of human relationships and to make more just and equitable decisions. I presented the jury with a video compilation showcasing Grandma Amelia engaged in a diverse range of community activities, from orchestrating fundraising galas to distributing food to underprivileged families. The visuals were self-explanatory, unequivocally demonstrating Grandma Amelia's unwavering commitment to her community. Thus, the courtroom metamorphosed into a looking glass wherein the community could behold its reflection, acknowledging its values, aspirations, and cherished hopes. Grandmother Amelia was not merely a defendant, but rather an embodiment of the community's inherent fortitude and unwavering resilience. Consequently, the jury felt compelled to render a verdict that not only judged Grandmother Amelia, but also honored the history and values of the community. Justice was not merely an individual matter, but rather a collective imperative. Thus, hope was rekindled, illuminating weary faces and suffusing the air with an atmosphere of optimism. The truth was nigh, and justice, at long last, was on the verge of being served. Now, consider how the judicial system, ideally a bulwark of impartiality, can be susceptible to insidious influences. The pursuit of truth, theoretically the pole-star guiding every decision, is sometimes obscured by political pressures, ingrained biases, and the relentless quest for self-aggrandizement. The prosecutor, once viewed as a champion of justice, now personified this distortion, transforming the trial into a stage for his personal ambition. This realization didn't dishearten me, rather, it galvanized me to redouble my efforts. I understood that the struggle for Grandmother Amelia's innocence transcended the mere application of the law, entering the arena of battling systemic corruption and defending the integrity of the judicial system. It was imperative to expose the prosecutor's machinations, to reveal his shadowy motivations, and to demonstrate that the pursuit of truth could not be compromised by petty interests. Conversely, the prosecutor resorted to devious tactics, manipulating the evidence, distorting the facts, and intimidating witnesses. His inflammatory rhetoric, rife with half-truths and malicious insinuations, sought to ignite public opinion and pressure the jury into delivering a guilty verdict. Thus, I decided to counterattack, wielding the prosecutor's own weapons against him. I began to scrutinize his ethical conduct, expose his conflicts of interest, and unveil his political ambitions. I demonstrated that his obsession with convicting grandmother Amelia was not predicated on concrete evidence, but rather on an insatiable thirst for recognition and power. Indeed, it is crucial to acknowledge that impartiality is not an innate gift, but rather an arduous achievement, a steadfast commitment to honesty and objectivity. The judge, ostensibly the guardian of impartiality, is at times confronted with their own biases and limitations, running the risk of succumbing to external pressures and compromising the integrity of the judgment. Grandma Amelia epitomized humility and serenity, steadfastly maintaining her innocence and trusting in divine justice. Her unwavering faith, inexhaustible resilience, and boundless compassion inspired me to persevere, even in the face of adversity. I resolved to delve deeply into the prosecutor's past, searching for evidence of his questionable conduct in other cases. I unearthed accusations of evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and the utterance of biased pronouncements during previous trials. These revelations bolstered my hypothesis that his obsession with convicting Granny Amelia was not an isolated incident, but rather an ingrained pattern of behavior. Now, consider how this applies when confronted with situations of abuse of power, when you feel oppressed by authority figures who exploit their position to manipulate, intimidate, and subjugate. What is the optimal course of action? To succumb to fear and resignation, or to fight with valor and resolve to uphold your rights and your values? I thereby presented the jury with a comprehensive dossier containing all the information I had gathered regarding the prosecutor, exposing his character flaws and his unethical conduct. I demonstrated that he was not a champion of justice, but rather a wolf in sheep's clothing, a predator who exploited his position to serve his own self-interests. I subpoenaed witnesses who had been victims of the prosecutor's abusive conduct in other cases, individuals who had suffered injustices and were willing to testify to reveal the truth. Their poignant and illuminating testimonies exposed the prosecutor's dark side, demonstrating that he was a menace to society. The prosecutor sought to discredit the witnesses, alleging that they were motivated by vengeance and therefore lacked credibility. He argued that their accusations were unsubstantiated and that there was no concrete evidence of his malfeasance. I refuted this allegation, demonstrating that the witnesses were willing to risk their own lives to reveal the truth, driven by a sense of justice and a desire to prevent others from suffering the same injustices. Their testimonies were consistent, coherent, and corroborated by other evidence. In short, the struggle to prove Granny Amelia's innocence had morphed into a battle against systemic corruption and a defense of the judicial system's integrity. It was an arduous, uneven fight, but one I was willing to confront with courage and resolve, trusting in divine justice and the strength of my own heart. Oklahoma's history, replete with pioneering spirit and resilience, also bore the scars of past injustices, such as discrimination against minorities and the exploitation of rural laborers. The prosecutor, with considerable finesse, conjured these specters of the past, implying that Grandmother Amelia, by virtue of her social standing, represented the perpetuation of an oppressive system. However, this rhetorical maneuver was a misrepresentation of the truth. Throughout her life, Grandmother Amelia had consistently dedicated herself to combating inequality and fostering social inclusion. Her work at the Community Association stood as concrete evidence of her commitment to the underprivileged, irrespective of their origin or social standing. It was paramount to reclaim the genuine history of Grandmother Amelia, deconstructing the spurious narratives fabricated by the prosecutor and presenting an authentic portrayal of her life and deeds. To that end, I resolved to summon witnesses who could vouch for her commitment to social causes and her struggle against discrimination. It is crucial to understand that collective memory is not an immutable monolith, but rather a dynamic mosaic of recollections and interpretations. Each generation reinterprets the past in light of its own experiences and values, constructing new narratives that shape its identity and sense of belonging. Conversely, the prosecutor exploited the prevailing ignorance regarding local history, disseminating spurious information and capitalizing on latent prejudices. His strategy was to fracture the community, fostering an atmosphere of distrust and animosity that hampered the pursuit of truth. Conversely, I resolved to foster a public discourse concerning the history of Oklahoma, encouraging critical reflection on both its past and present. I organized lectures, seminars, and exhibitions that addressed topics such as racial discrimination, labor exploitation, and the struggle for social justice. Moreover, recall how disinformation can be weaponized to manipulate public opinion and to rationalize unjust actions. The dissemination of spurious news, deceptive propaganda, and censorship are all tools employed by authoritarian regimes to control the populace and to suppress dissent. It was paramount to combat disinformation with information, presenting precise data, verified facts, and rigorous analyses. I urged the local press to thoroughly investigate the case of Grandma Amelia, revealing the behind-the-scenes machinations of the accusation and exposing the prosecutor's maneuvers. Now, imagine what it would be like to live in a society where truth was systematically distorted, where history was rewritten to serve the interests of a ruling elite. What would it be like to place your trust in your leaders, your institutions, your neighbors? In light of this, it was imperative to champion freedom of expression, the right to information, and access to education. I advocated for the establishment of community libraries, the promotion of literacy courses, and the development of popular education programs. Furthermore, I began disseminating Grandma Amelia's story on social media, employing hashtags and memes to engage a broader audience. I created a website where individuals could share their own life stories, express their support for Grandma Amelia, and denounce corruption within the judicial system. Thus, the struggle to vindicate Grandma Amelia had metamorphosed into a battle for collective memory, historical truth, and freedom of expression. It was a struggle that enveloped the entire community, demanding courage, resolve, and an unwavering commitment to justice. Consequently, the groundswell of support for Grandma Amelia burgeoned daily, inundating the courthouse with letters, flowers, and messages of solidarity. People congregated in front of the building, chanting protest songs and brandishing placards emblazoned with affirmations of support for Grandma Amelia. Hope had been rekindled, illuminating weary faces and suffusing the air with an atmosphere of optimism. The truth was nigh, and justice, at long last, stood on the cusp of being served. In this light, the conviction or acquittal of Grandmother Amelia becomes merely a detail within a much grander tapestry. The true legacy of the story resides, perhaps, in its capacity to inspire us to strive for a world where truth prevails over falsehood, where justice triumphs over injustice, and where love transcends hatred. Like the colors of a rainbow emerging after a storm, hope manifests itself amidst adversity, reminding us that light will always find a way to shine, even in the darkest of times. It behooves us, therefore, to cultivate this hope, nurturing it with concrete actions and an unwavering commitment to the values we believe in. As we prepare for this final reflection, may each of us feel inspired to follow in Grandmother Amelia's footsteps, becoming an agent of transformation within our own community. May the pursuit of justice be our compass, compassion our strength, and love our greatest weapon. May truth, like a mighty river, continue to flow, irrigating hearts and transforming the world. Thus, with hearts brimming with hope and minds receptive to truth, let us prepare ourselves for the denouement of this tale, secure in the knowledge that justice, however protracted, will invariably prevail. May the light of truth illuminate the path of justice, guiding us towards a more just and equitable future for all. In the twilight of that protracted day, as the jury withdrew to deliberate, the silence in the courtroom was almost palpable, thick with anticipation that hung in the air like a balmy summer breeze. Grandmother Amelia held my hand, her wrinkled fingers intertwined with mine, a tacit gesture of strength and mutual trust. I gazed at her face, etched with the lines of time and life's trials, and saw there not the fear of conviction, but the serenity of one who knows her own truth. In that instant, I understood that the real victory had already been won. Regardless of the verdict, the journey we had undertaken together, the battle we had waged against injustice, had already transformed our lives irrevocably. We had learned that truth, however long it takes to be revealed, invariably finds a way to shine, and that justice, however fallible, is an ideal worth striving for. When the jury returned, the tension was almost unbearable. The judge read the verdict in a solemn voice, "Not guilty." A collective sigh of relief rippled through the courtroom, shattering the oppressive silence. Grandma Amelia beamed, a radiant smile illuminating her entire face, and embraced me tightly. Tears of joy streamed down my face, mingling with gratitude and emotion. But the story didn't end there. Days later, Jack, racked with guilt and tormented by his conscience, confessed to the crime. He revealed that he had embezzled the funds to pay for his daughter's medical treatment and that he never intended to harm grandmother Amelia. His act of honesty, however belated, brought a certain solace, a feeling that justice, in some way, had been served. However, the true learning lay in the realization that justice is not merely confined to the enforcement of the law, but also necessitates compassion and forgiveness. Grandmother Amelia, with her wisdom and munificence, forgave Jack, recognizing the pain and desperation that had driven him. Her act of clemency demonstrated that genuine greatness resides in the capacity to transcend anger and resentment and to offer a second chance to those who err. That summer in Oklahoma would never be forgotten. The fine dust that danced languidly in the air seemed now to carry with it not only the memories of the past, but also the promise of a more just and compassionate future. Grandma Amelia continued to bake her oatmeal cookies, care for the neighbors, and dedicate her life to the community. And I, inspired by her courage and her faith, became an advocate for justice, perpetually seeking the truth and striving for a world where kindness and compassion would prevail over malice and injustice. The real work, however, begins now. May the story of Grandmother Amelia inspire us to be more just, more compassionate, and more courageous in our lives. May the pursuit of truth be our compass, justice our ideal, and love our greatest strength. And as we tread this path, may we build a world where hope blossoms in every heart and where human dignity is the supreme value. May the memory of this summer propel us to action, to be agents of change, to build a future where justice is not merely a promise, but a tangible reality for all.